So some time ago, this channel hit 5,000 subscribers, and since then, we're now more than halfway to 6,000. So I wanted to take a moment to thank you for your support. You guys are so encouraging with your comments, you leave me such thoughtful words, and it really makes all the effort that goes into this channel worthwhile. So to mark the occasion, I thought I would do something that's a bit out of character for me. We're doing a Q&A today, which is like very YouTube. It's quite different from the more analytical stuff that I do, but nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoy it. We are still having our, in-depth direct discussion about Eurovision, and there are plenty of videos that are in the works, so I hope that you come back for that. But today we're taking a bit of a breather. So let's get to the first question. Where are you from? Toronto, Canada, which when you're from here, you don't say Toronto, you say Toronto or Toronto. What brought you to Eurovision, and what's your earliest ESC memory? So as you probably would guess, in Canada there isn't much of a culture around Eurovision. There are people who do know of it, but it's mostly because the show is bigger now and has become more accessible through the internet, or because they've found out about it through the Netflix movie, for example. So for most people, if they're hearing about the contest, it's usually through the news. And for myself, when I think back to my first Eurovision memory, it was through a CBC News piece about the controversy of France's 2008 entry and how it was like the first time that they were sending something completely in English. Later on, I actually worked at that same station, the CBC Radio, which is our national broadcaster, and I worked on an arts and culture show that would do an annual segment about Eurovision. I also had like a colleague of mine explain it to me, and he was like, yeah, the music's like not that serious and it's all over the top and camp, so on and so forth. But it wasn't until 2018, when I was living in Spain, that I actually got to see the show for myself. And some of the prejudices that I'd been given about it were definitely there, but I got to see it for a bit more of what it is, for the kind of high-end TV production that it is, and I had much more of a positive impression than I was expecting. What is your favorite country song-wise in Eurovision? So if we're talking about a single country's record when looking at the entirety of Eurovision's history, it is without a doubt Italy. They are consistently sending high quality. They have very few misses when you look at all of their songs. And what I find is most interesting is that their winners are not their best songs. Often it's the ones that came like second or third. And even the one time that they finished last with Domenico Modugno, they had a great song with a truly outstanding performance. Now, if we're focusing on the modern contest, Italy is definitely one that is still a favorite of mine, but I think everybody knows at this point that I'm a big fan of Portugal. I like that they prioritize songs that speak to their sensibilities, and they don't really worry too much about like how it's going to do in the contest. And when we're talking about Festival da Canção, it just vibes with my tastes quite a lot. Ukraine is up there as well, I have to say, particularly in the 2020s, and that might be one of the reasons why it frustrates me so much that there's all this negativity around Ukraine, or at least like you can never escape the negative people who are saying, oh, they're only successful because of the war, or they're always going to get sympathy votes. And while I definitely don't deny that those factors are in play, they're sending good quality. So those are the three countries that are like pretty consistently on my radar. There are a few others that tend to be there more often than not. In particular, Lithuania has been really, really appealing to my tastes in the 2020s. France has been there more often than not as well. Sweden's there too, I have to say, but it's mostly within the last few years where there have been songs that have made me the most excited, like 2022, 2023. This year, I think Sweden's great. And then up until last year, Iceland was on my radar pretty consistently, because when I think back to like 2019, which is the first contest that I watched from an earlier stage, right up until 2023, I loved all of those songs, but things have changed. What quality always makes a particular Eurovision song rank high in your ranking? The most important thing is this a song that I want to listen to outside of the contest? Do I feel this song enough to want to carry with me throughout my day? That's literally all there is to it. Which song do you think is the most underrated in ESC history? So generally speaking, when it comes to my own expectations about how a song should do in the contest, or like how the fans should feel, I accepted a long time ago that my tastes don't always align with everyone else, and I don't lose anything by being, a really strong cheerleader of a song that no one else feels enthusiasm for. But to not be boring and give you an answer, we watched all the Eurovisions going back in time, and we made it all the way to 1967, having not heard a single thing about Monaco's song that year. Such an unexpected entry. To be deliberately singing out of key with this like nonchalant expression, and to be singing about not wanting to die a virgin before a nuclear bomb drops. Like, I would have never thought of hearing anything like that from Eurovision, and I think it is overdue for some appreciation. Who is your Eurovision crush? Who isn't my crush? In seriousness, I want to keep the opportunity open to interview any artist, and while I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to say that you think someone is attractive, it's also not very professional, and so I'm gonna have to keep those to myself. But if we're talking about artists from earlier editions, then I think we should be in the clear, let's hope. So I would say one woman comes to mind that I think is absolutely gorgeous, and that would be Amina from France. For men, there isn't one that stands out quite as much as Amina does for women. But if I really think about it, I would say I remember thinking that Kim Floor from Finland was quite attractive. He's got that kind of like classically handsome look. And while we're at it, I would say his singing partner Päivi Paunu was quite beautiful as well. They definitely had a few good things going for them. If you had the power to change 3 things about Eurovision, what would they be? Well, without derailing this video too much and getting too deep into the topic, I think the most urgent change is to drop the non-political facade, because very few people are buying it and it's setting up the show for hypocrisy. I strongly believe that the show can be defined in other ways, and if you're going to say that you value diversity, then you're not going to be able to convince people of that when you are allowing in countries that are literally wiping ethnic groups off the face of the planet. But anyway, let's steer off that path and talk about some more lighthearted changes. So in 2023, I did this video about the voting system after that year's grand final. It was mostly focused on how the jury system works and some of the misconceptions about how the score is actually tabulated. But towards the end of that video, I made some proposals for ideas that I thought would be in the interest of fairness. There was one idea that a number of people seemed to like quite a lot, and it was around designing the running order. Basically, it gave the producers full control over the flow of performances, but then one entry would be drawn at random, and the aim was to still have the ability to build the flow of the show, but then introduce an element of randomness so that entries aren't deliberately given favorable spots or, put in the spot of death, for example. Now, truthfully, at the time, I didn't really mind that much that the producers were drawing for halves and then deciding the running order that way. But since then, they've introduced the producer's choice draw, which gives them the ability to put half of the entries wherever they want in the program, which makes the favoritism look even more deliberate. So now, this looks a hell of a lot more fair than what they're currently doing. And while I understand that there are bigger fish to fry, I would like to see this integrated someday. The last change that I would make, which I accept is probably more unrealistic, is that I would love if delegations had the option to substitute one of the 6 live inputs for a live instrument. It would be really great if songs that have instrumental sections could actually be played live. It would just give a bit more of a human feel to the overall show. I understand that it doesn't really work out that well when it comes to sound mixing, especially doing so really quickly and in a really formulaic way, but it's just something that I wish could happen. What's it like to cover Eurovision while Israel is still in it? I'm asking as an ex-fan who hasn't kept up this year. On the one hand, it is genuinely fascinating to see how sheepish everyone has become, especially after taking such a firm stance on Russia. On the other hand, it has been really hard to remain invested in the show as a fan. Nowadays, it's much less about me wanting to watch the show and more about telling a story that I think needs to be told. There are other aspects that I consider to be pretty disappointing. Like, I truly wish that all the creators that have left Israel out of their coverage would publicly condemn the contest. Unfortunately, it seems like that's also become a deciding factor in whether or not people get accreditation. We don't know that for sure, but that's a pattern that seems to be presenting itself. But a big motivator in sticking with the contest has been seeing how much it matters to folks like you, who very clearly see a problem, but don't see it reflected in the people that drive the conversation. And I'm really grateful for all of you who have told me how much it matters to you, because if I were just a viewer, it would matter to me too. Are you still going to watch Eurovision 2025? I am, because I'm covering the show after all, but since last year, I have a few stipulations about how I interact with Eurovision, and they mostly have to do with money. Firstly, I don't vote in the show anymore. That means that 2023 is the one and only contest where I contributed to the official results and helped Blanca Paloma get a whopping 2 points from the rest of the world. Secondly, I don't buy tickets to Eurovision or any Eurovision associated event. It does mean that when I go to cover the contest in person, there are fewer opportunities to meet other people and, hang out with my friends. But aside from not wanting to give my money to the contest or the event in general, I'm just not in the mood. That's all it is. Now, specific to 2025, if I wasn't covering the contest, I might have just skipped this year, and that relates to another question that I got. I've seen a lot of people saying that this year is weak. I completely disagree. What are your thoughts regarding whether this Eurovision is a weak year? So I think what needs to be emphasized is that taste is subjective. If you are someone who is really excited by the 2025 lineup, you shouldn't let what other people say ruin it for you. So please keep that in mind, because if I'm being perfectly honest, I do think that this is a weak year. I think it's the weakest of the decade by far, and depending on how the results go, it could set a precedent that makes things worse in the future. So right now, I'm sitting on a video that is mostly written about the songs, and the reason why I haven't finished it is because I worry that it's too negative. And given that talking about the controversies already puts like a negative focus on certain developments, I was concerned that people would think that my opinion of the songs is negative because of the controversies, rather than it being for the songs themselves. And so unfortunately, I don't think that video is going to see the light of day. We will, of course, talk about the songs eventually when we start talking about qualifiers and whatnot. But if you want like a TLDR version for why I think this year is so weak, here's the gist of it. So first and foremost, the novelty factor has been dialed up quite a lot. I'm not saying that novelty songs are bad on their own, but overall, it just feels like a significantly more gimmicky year. The second thing is that there's a lot of genre switching midway through the songs this year. And of course, like we've seen that done effectively in some of the most recent editions, but with this year's songs, a lot of them feel like their ideas are unfocused and that the writers were self-conscious about the identity of the song. And then lastly, among the songs that I would consider to be this year's worst, some of them are like really lacking self-awareness in a way that makes me feel like the professionalism and caliber that we've been seeing lately is like starting to slip away. But again, that's just me. If you think this is a great year, all the power to you. Why isn't Malta this year considered a jury favorite? Okay, so there's no way around this one then. I haven't personally given a lot of thought to the jury appeal of Malta specifically because I find the song irritating, but if I had to make a guess about what factors could be working against Malta if they make it to the final, here are a few. The production is not up to current standards, sounds like it was made 10 years ago, and is not a comfortable listen. The staging will probably depend on the same antics that we saw in the national selection, which do not look professional and could rub people the wrong way. And lastly, like, musically it all sounds pretty dispensable. Like, I am 1000% convinced that they were so committed to this serving cunt pun that became the driving force behind the song, and everything else was an afterthought. Now, what could work in her favor is that we've seen Mirjana be able to do those vocal runs, and she does have a level of vocal capacity that could attract jury points. I would say that she's a lot more consistent with the higher and more like vocal flexing moments, whereas the rest of it is considerably more sloppy. And so I'm sorry if you really like this song. I could be wrong too, but I simply can't be bothered with it. If I'm in the mood for some cunt, then I'm gonna go for Marina's Cantissimo. How do you deal with online negativity and nasty comments? What helps is remembering that the vast majority of people that you interact with online are faceless to you and they don't really care about you. The ones who do care about you will treat you with respect first and foremost, even if they're criticizing you, and anything less is not worth your energy. Which is the greatest interval act, and why is it Riverdance? Yeah, I mean, it is Riverdance. There's no competition. It's just epic from start to finish. And every time that you think it's peaked, it just ups the ante more and more. What type of music would you like to see more of in Eurovision, and what is overrepresented? Good quality hip-hop is something that we're really overdue for, and especially considering like how much presence hip-hop has in so many different markets, it's quite surprising that we've seen so little of it. And like, sure, we're seeing more songs with rapping verses, but as for like songs that are, you know, purely hip-hop, we have hardly any. Now, we do actually have one winner that has a very strong hip-hop identity, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't see the song for what it is, and the political circumstances around it have clouded people's judgment about how much of a deserved winner it would be. Now, when we do see hip-hop, I would expect that Italy would be among the first to bring something that like really does well, because we see plenty of hip-hop in Sanremo every year, and they usually have a few songs that do quite well in the contest, so it's just a matter of time before one of them wins. And as for what's overrepresented, I mean, it's obviously the heavily choreographed pop numbers. And I mean, we know why we get them every year, but I think the bar was set really high with Chanel, and we just haven't seen anything come close since. How does an ordinary day look for you? Not that exciting. Between my day job and YouTube, it's a lot of sitting at a computer and doing editing or research. I do also work on site, which gets me out of the house, but most days I work from home. Now, with that said, I would say that what makes my days less monotonous are my hobbies and how I like integrate them into my day. So firstly, it would be music. My musical tastes are pretty broad, and I can listen to almost any genre at any time. So when I'm, on the go or making a meal, or sometimes if I've just gone outside for a walk. Then there would be exercise, which has been a part of my life for a while. I exercise 5 to 6 times a week, and often when I'm exercising, I'm listening to music. The only exception is if I'm doing something longer and low intensity where I need to keep my brain a little bit more engaged, and in that case, I would be listening to like a podcast or something. And podcasts tie into another hobby of mine, which is current affairs. I've always been the kind of person that is, keeping up to date with the news. I have my criticisms as well of news media, having worked in it myself, but staying informed is a pretty big priority for me. And then there's coffee, which I am a big fan of. I do, however, have to limit myself to 2 cups a day so that I'm not like caffeine dependent. And that can also be an excuse to get out of the house, to, go to a local coffee shop. And depending on what I'm doing, I can also bring my work with me and, just kind of be in a different environment. And then apart from that, I, wind down at home with my partner and dog, play games, watch TV, and go out with my friends on the weekend. All things considered, I'm a pretty normal guy. Some of you had some questions about Magic the Gathering, which is fair because behind me are several commander decks. Unfortunately, I'm not the Magic player in the house, that's my partner. But with that said, I have played with him from time to time. He even made me a custom deck, which is a blue-white deck, and the commander is Medomai the Ageless. On top of that, he also made some custom cards out of Eurovision acts. These were my favorite acts from 2020 and 2021, and Montaigne's is actually double-sided. What's your favorite kind of beetle? Liverpudlian beetles. What genre of music do you like the most? So any kind of electronic music I consider to be like my home musically, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that I experience synesthesia, so every sound is associated with an image. So when I was growing up, if I would hear music and I could identify the instrument, I would often see the instrument that's associated with that sound, so like a piano, guitar, or violin. But with synthesizers, because they sound so different from one to the next, I see like colors and shapes, and usually the kind of images that they make are abstract. As I've gotten older and my tastes have become more broad, I'm at the point where I can get past the images of the instruments and see broader pictures in any kind of song. Like in particular, I would say classical music also creates quite evocative images, but they tend to be more realistic and tangible, like landscapes. Whereas with electronic music, it's still quite obscure, and it's to the point where I can't even translate what I'm seeing onto paper. If I try and like draw an image of what I'm seeing, it still doesn't quite look like what I see up here. Outside of ESC, what are your favorite artists? So when it comes to like well-known electronic artists that I've been listening to for like more or less their entire careers, I would say Hybrid, Faithless, Daft Punk, Chicane, Prodigy. When it comes to like lesser known artists, I would say Elderbrook makes some really great modern dance music. I also really like Jesse McCormick, who's from Canada. I also really like the Presets from Australia. Tycho makes great instrumental music that has these really beautiful images with it, and often has this like West Coast USA sound to it. With respect to singer-songwriters, I like Anne Brune from Norway, Nemesis from Canada, Lapsley from the UK, Imogen Heat from the UK, who had one of the most interesting concerts that I'd been to, where she was showcasing all this technology that she had developed, and she was like taking questions from the audience. Never seen that before. And when it comes to like really established artists, I would say Bee Gees, Fleetwood Mac, Frankie Valli, the Cranberries. There are quite a few that I am always like keen on listening to. The list could go on for a while. Your favorite Arabic song? I don't know if I have one that's like my absolute favorite, but I will say that right now I've got one in my rotation by Ahmed Moneka called Oh Mother. And if not that one, then it would probably be a song by Mashhur Leila like Kalam or Ayudi. Canadians are more rock than Europop. Are you an exception? I mean, I like my share of rock as well, especially from like the 60s and 70s. Now, with that said, outside of Eurovision, I don't actually listen to that much Europop. If I do, it will be something that a friend recommends me or just something random that appears in my feed. What type of music do you listen to relax? Any specific artists that help you chill out during hectic days? Tycho, as I mentioned before, has a lot of tracks that are really relaxing. Also, Oliver Arnolds, he does a lot of beautiful orchestral and electronic music. In fact, he did a collaboration with Loreen recently that is not just a musical project, but also a short film, and it's really relaxing as well. I think a lot of you would enjoy that. Beyond specific artists and songs, I've also been really getting into these like polyrhythmic videos on YouTube that have repetitive and relaxing tones, and so sometimes I'll just put it on in the background, and other moments I'll just put on like a long mix of ambient tones and just zone out completely. Are you into musicals? Not really. I'm open to seeing one every now and then, but I don't necessarily go out of my way. I think the last one that I saw would have been Jersey Boys, and that was like 15 years ago. If you have a recommendation for me, let me know. I've heard good things about Hadestown. And Hamilton. I still haven't seen Hamilton. That's supposed to be pretty good, but I don't know. Let me know what's good to see. Is your last name Scottish? Yes. How Scottish am I? I don't know. The genealogy on my dad's side of the family isn't the clearest, and apparently our family's time in Canada goes back for quite a few generations, and so I highly doubt that everyone in the family is Scottish. There's got to be some other things in there, but on my mom's side, I'm Austrian. As a Canadian, how are you feeling about Canada right now with the elections coming up? So by the time this video goes out, the election will have come and gone. All I'll say for the time being is that I always exercise my right to vote, but I have never in my entire life seen a candidate in which I am enthusiastic to vote for them. Ever. When it comes to Canada on the whole, it is pretty cool to see people standing up so firmly to Trump's tariffs and supporting Canadian businesses. It is incredibly rare to see Canadians, commit to a single cause in such an organized way, and I hope that people can take that energy and apply it to other causes like the environment. Favorite movies? Cliche question, but I always like to hear people's choices. No, I like the question, and there are so many movies that I like that it's hard to pick favorites, so I'm gonna do a classic one, a modern mainstream one, and a modern independent one. So for the classic, I'm gonna go with Network from 1976. If you know anything about the themes of that film, you might find that it explains my approach to Eurovision and the media in general. For a modern mainstream film, I'm going to say Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Michel Gondry is one of my favorite directors, and in addition to being visually stunning, the story itself is just beautiful. And for a modern independent film, I'm going to go with Lucio Castro's End of the Century from 2019. It's about two men that meet in Barcelona, and you see how their lives intersect at 3 different points in time. Without giving too much away, they play with reality and fantasy in a way that's quite ambiguous, and it just leaves you with this very poignant feeling at the end. What is your favorite sport? When it comes to Major League sports, it's not really a world that I'm a part of. I do enjoy going to baseball games, and it's like the one type of sport that I'm most likely to go see like a professional game. When it comes to playing sports, I enjoy anything on the water. When I was in high school, I did something called Dragon Boat, which was really fun, also very intense, and it was my window into the world of fitness as well. There was also a short period of my life where I was doing capoeira, which is a combination of a martial art and dance, and what I loved about it so much is that it's like a complete experience. Everyone plays with one another regardless of gender or age or ability, and music is a big part of it. You have to learn the songs and instruments, and it has this like fascinating history of resistance against oppression. It's a really cool experience that I think everybody should try once in their life. In one of your live streams, you spoke with your dog in Portuguese. How many languages do you speak? Falo português, como você sabe, português brasileiro. It is the language that I need the most practice with because I just don't have as many opportunities to use it. También hablo español, que empecé a aprender un poco antes de mudarme a España. Estoy bastante más cómodo con español, pero aún no oxidado. And then of course English. I can understand a little bit of French because everybody in English-speaking Canada learns French up until a certain point, although it's quite basic in school. But in general, I would say that I speak 3 languages because those are the ones that I can actually communicate with, even if not perfectly. If you could interview any artist, past or present, who would it be and what's the connection that you have with them? Honestly, it would be Loreen, and I don't say that because she's a Eurovision artist. I just think there'd be a lot to learn from her approach to sound, to the way that she fleshes out her performances visually, to her like unwavering commitment to artistry. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll happen someday. Is there a specific genre of music that you think will become more mainstream soon? Honestly, I'm terrible at these predictions. I think what we're seeing right now in music is an emphasis on brevity, and that could be an influence of TikTok, like having musical ideas that can be summed up in a few seconds. But when it comes to genres, it just feels like we're kind of like all over the map with music nowadays. And in some ways that's pretty exciting because you never know what's gonna be popular next. But at the same time, I feel like there isn't quite a single genre that is like the sound of the 2020s, because everything that's popular right now is inspired by an era of music that's long gone. So yeah, I don't know what it will be, but I feel like we're waiting for something to come in that will kind of, be groundbreaking, and that will really take off. Anyway, that's my best attempt at a Q&A video. Thank you so much for all your questions. I think I got them all, but if I happen to miss yours, please ask it again in the comments and I'll get back to you. You will be getting more Eurovision specific videos coming very soon. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel so that you can come back for those, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.